In the snowy mountains of Flagstaff, Arizona, CEO Ethan Cole was driving toward a high-profile tech gala that his board considered essential for public image. He didn't care about the flashing cameras, the small talk, or the swirling rumors about him being too cold and too corporate. What bothered him was how investors insisted he bring a date to appear relatable. Ethan hated pretending. Still, he agreed, because running a multi-billion-dollar company meant doing things he didn't always like. His mind was on business strategies, not fate, not miracles, and definitely not what was waiting for him in the storm ahead. The weather had turned vicious without warning. A brutal winter storm swept across the highway like a white curtain, erasing the world in seconds. Snow hammered the windshield, and the road vanished beneath layers of ice. Ethan gripped the steering wheel as the car skidded sideways, forcing him onto a narrow forest road. He tried to remain calm, but the wind roared like a living creature. It wasn't long before visibility hit zero. The storm trapped him in a swirling white maze. Every instinct told him he needed to stop before he crashed. Just when Ethan thought the situation couldn't grow worse, something caught his eye, a small, dark shape lying motionless in the snow at the edge of the road. At first, he thought it was an animal, but as he stepped closer, his breath stopped. It was a child. A tiny boy, curled in on himself, shivering violently, his clothes soaked and stiff with ice. His lips were blue, his fingers trembling, and his eyes barely open. Ethan didn't think. He acted. Stripping off his coat, he wrapped it around the boy, feeling how frighteningly light he was, as though hunger had carved him hollow. Carrying the child through the storm felt like dragging stones. The wind beat against Ethan's face, the cold slicing through even his expensive winter clothes. But he pushed on until he reached his secluded cabin, a place he used only when he needed to disappear from corporate noise. He kicked the door open, rushed inside, and placed the boy near the fireplace. The child's breathing was weak but steady. Ethan lit the fire with shaking hands, boiled water, and made hot soup. It wasn't enough, but it was something. He checked the boy for injuries, whispering reassurances he didn't even know he had in him. The storm raged for 4 long days, turning the outside world into a frozen prison. Ethan had no cell service, no way to contact authorities, and no one to rely on except himself. During those 4 days, he cared for the child with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed. He fed him warm soup every few hours, wrapped him in blankets, and kept a fire burning day and night. Slowly, the boy's color returned. His eyes opened more fully. He spoke a few soft words, barely whispers, but enough for Ethan to realize he wasn't speaking English. The language sounded ancient, melodic, and unfamiliar. Apache. The realization hit Ethan like a silent thunderclap. This child wasn't just lost. Someone was searching for him, desperately, fearfully, endlessly. The thought haunted Ethan as he watched the snow fall outside, burying the world in silence. He wondered how long the boy had been alone, how far he had wandered, and what horrors he must have endured to end up unconscious in the snow. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest: responsibility. Not corporate responsibility, not public image, but human responsibility. He didn't know it yet, but finding that child would change the course of his life forever. On the 4th morning, the blizzard finally broke, leaving behind a world transformed into shimmering glass. Sunlight danced across the snowy Arizona cliffs, turning every ridge of the White Mountains into a glowing sculpture of ice. Ethan stood in the quiet cabin kitchen, preparing breakfast for the child who had become his unexpected responsibility. He felt a strange sense of peace he hadn't known in years, until a sudden sound shattered it. Boom. Then again. Boom. Boom. Heavy knocks, urgent and forceful, shook the cabin door as if the storm itself had returned in human form. Ethan froze. No one ever came this deep into the wilderness. His cabin sat miles off the main road, with the nearest small town far beyond the frozen trails. The knock came again, louder this time, vibrating through the wooden walls. He swallowed hard and moved toward the door, his heartbeat echoing the sound of the knocks. His hand hovered above the handle for a moment, every instinct telling him to be cautious. Finally, slowly, he pulled the door open, letting in a rush of icy air, and the sight waiting on the other side took his breath away. Standing outside were 3 Apache women wrapped in traditional woven shawls, their hair dusted with snowflakes, their cheeks raw from days of cold wind. Exhaustion clung to them like a shadow, but behind their tired eyes burned a fierce, unyielding hope. They looked as though they'd been searching for miles, following the storm's trail with nothing but determination. The smallest of the women clutched a handmade satchel close to her chest, while the eldest stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, whether from cold or emotion Ethan couldn't tell. The eldest woman's voice cracked as she spoke, carrying both desperation and deep gratitude. "We've been searching for our lost child. The storm separated us. Thank you for keeping him safe." Her words wrapped around Ethan like a warm blanket against the cold. Before he could respond, the boy darted past him, running straight into their arms with a cry that broke the morning silence. The women dropped to their knees, embracing him tightly, their hands shaking as they touched his face, his hair, his small shoulders, as if making sure he was truly alive. What followed was a cascade of emotions so raw Ethan felt like an outsider witnessing something sacred. The women wept, relief pouring out like melting ice after a long winter. Their tears mixed with the boys as they held him close, whispering prayers and comforting words in Apache. Fear, exhaustion, and overwhelming gratitude blended together, filling the snowy air with a kind of warmth Ethan had never felt even in bustling gala halls or corporate boardrooms. He stood silently at the doorway, realizing he had never seen love expressed with such purity and power. Ethan Cole was not a man easily moved. Years of business hardened him, trained him to stay composed, strategic, unreadable. But this moment, this reunion, pierced straight through the armor he had spent years building. Watching the boy cling to his family, watching the women thank him with eyes full of sincerity, he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't about image or success anymore. It wasn't about the gala he'd missed or the reputation he'd been forced to maintain. It was about life, simple, fragile, and deeply connected. Saving the child had changed him more than he wanted to admit. As the women guided the boy toward their horses, ready to take him home, Ethan realized something quietly, profoundly true. Fate had brought him here for a reason. Not to impress investors. Not to appear compassionate for the cameras. But to discover the kind of humanity he'd forgotten existed. What he didn't know, as he watched them disappear into the sparkling morning light, was that this encounter would echo in his life long after the snow melted. Because this was only the beginning of a story he never expected, one that would reshape the man he thought he was.